our session. And so we are recording. You can use the chat box at any time during the session. And if you want to talk, and we hope you do, and sometimes we may even call on you if we know you, please raise your hand and we can get you unmuted, because we do want to hear your beautiful voices throughout this conversation. And then as normal, but you know, we do these things these days, we will share back out the PowerPoint, the recording, and the chat box text. So keep it clean in there, guys, to afterwards, so that we have a record of this conversation, which is going to flow into this larger statewide conversation as well. Okay. Quick agenda. We're going to have a quick conversation about goals and common principles. So we want to ground our conversation in why are we talking about this and why is it meaningful to us as youth development professionals. We're going to talk about this summer. We're going to talk about the fall and beyond. We're going to get into specific policy recommendations, and then we'll have a summary and next steps. So we have really 4 goals for these conversations. One is to engage you all, our youth development leaders, in this conversation about recovery. Sometimes we don't always get called to the table, so we have to create tables for ourselves. And then we also can find ways to leverage our partnerships to have our voices heard even more so. We want to be concrete. We want to identify actionable things that we can do maybe this summer, and then look into the fall for also those things that we can say we bring to our partners as that is a value add to the work that they're doing. We want to have recommendations about how we can partner with schools and school systems during this recovery and reopening time. And we want to take all of those conversations we just had about those actionable steps and recommendations and put them together in a something that we can use both at the state level and you can use at the local level. So first, we want to really take our youth development, or put our youth development hats on. I was going to say take off, but no, we want to keep them on, and ground ourselves in some common principles. We've had 4 conversations around the state already. So Western Maryland, Hartford, Cecil counties, Baltimore County, and Baltimore City. And these are the resulting common principles that have come out of those discussions. And what we're hoping you guys will do, we'll take a look at these and say, what's missing from it? Or what could be strengthened? Or what other words do we need to have represented here? And if you're okay with them, you can just give us this looks good in the chat box. But if you want to add something, or you want to make a suggestion, you please jump in. And then once we kind of decide that this looks good, we'll move on to our questions. So if this looks good to you, you can give us a thumbs up. Yeah, or give us a +1 on something that you think is maybe one of the highest priorities, like Tara did with social emotional well-being.
Great. Great.
People may be typing right. Furiously. So everybody's digging these. Again, this is like a additive feature. So as we go through and people are giving us suggestions and kind of making, so looks like we've got some pretty good consensus.
And it looks like there's some folks that don't see the thumbs up option. So I would have to.
There isn't a thumbs up option. but you
I
can,
don't see it, but that's, you know,
you
yeah,
can type thumbs up into the chat box.
gotcha.
Unless there is, sometimes I think it's in the meeting feature that you have the thumbs up and the clap
Yeah.
thing. I think it's not in the webinar feature. Isn't that weird? There's so many weird things about Zoom. The features that are in the meeting versus webinar, so strange. All right.
Mm-hmm.
So we are moving forward. Just give me a second. I'm gonna have to set this up real quick, Sue. So if you,
Okay.
hold on. Sorry, my polling feature is not working right for me right now. We may just have to do this as a chat box poll.
Okay.
So let's do it this way. If you, we want to know, the summer poll is really about, we want to know what you're doing this summer. Are you finding that you can't do anything this summer because you're constrained by funding, or your program plans just can't work in the current environment? Are you going virtual only? Are you doing some virtual in-person hybrids? Are you doing in-person only programming adapted? We want to know from all of you what your summer plans are. Oops, I'm getting ahead of myself. This summer. And I see some folks adding into the chat box. Thanks, Jen. And if you're not a program provider, you can say that as well. But so what are your plans for this summer in the chat box? So we have a couple we have an option 4. We have all virtual at this point, virtual, recorded and live classes. Nice. Online workshops and mailed some supplies. So at take home kits kind of thing. Virtual, and then virtual. So some are going to go virtual for now and then later in person. Virtual showcase instead of the fair. I know all your you poor 4-Hers and your fairs. I feel so mad. Face-to-face, hybrid, virtual summer school, depending on the topic. Limited youth employment opportunities. Zoom meetings for clubs. So I would love for somebody who is going to do a virtual in-person hybrid to come to raise your hand and let Jen take you off mute and tell us a little bit about that model for you. Any brave souls?
Looking at Elizabeth Hill had virtual until, and then, yeah. Elizabeth, could you tell us about that?
I don't really have a plan in place per se. We're just going to be doing virtual options versus some in-person options once we're allowed to, but we're virtual up until then. We are going to go to in-person with some virtual opportunities with our nature club, which is going to continue to meet through the summer.
You know, that's interesting because that was one of my, like, in my head, as I imagined how you could do virtual hybrid, like doing environmental ed seemed to be like a really great one where you could do classwork around the topic and then go out into fields or streams, do water testing or do other kinds of things, and that could lend itself nicely still to the social distancing. And
yes, we're going to be doing some hiking and working in a community garden.
Awesome.
Right. And Elizabeth, just clarify for the rest of the group, you are coming from an extension standpoint,
Yes, I'm the 4-H educator in Kent County.
Gotcha. Gotcha. All right. Okay.
Is there anybody who is with a school district who might speak to, I know schools are just finishing up right now, who might speak to anything that might be happening over the summer for the school district? I know there's a couple of folks from school systems on here.
Hi, this is Diane Stalls of Worcester County Schools.
Hi, Diane.
Hi, so we are doing a variety of things this summer. We just decided that we would go face-to-face with our summer school program with no more than, we can have up to 13 students. We can have up to 18, but we're maximum will be 13 because of the size of our rooms for socially distancing. It's going to be July 13th through August 13th, Monday through Thursday, about approximately 4 hours per day. There'll be all the temperature checks. The students will have to wear masks the entire time. I'm doing hybrid with our high school students for some of their courses. If they're doing some remediation and work like that, they'll be hybrid where they'll meet once a week at the school with the teacher, and then they will do some work online. We have students doing review credit to recover some of the credits and courses they may have failed in the past. And so those will be, some will be 100% virtual, and some students, especially our special needs students, will come to school 1 or 2 days a week for support while they do that. We're going to do we do a student employment program that we've done for years, and we're going to do a limited program with that, with our students only working within our schools, not within our community as they usually do. So it's going to be a challenge for all of us to do that. Worried about things like PPE. We provide transportation for our summer school program, so we have our bus drivers to consider with all of that. So it's been a challenge, and it's a work in progress. So that is, as of yesterday at 3 o'clock when we met, that was our plan. That may change.
Wow.
Sounds like a lot, and it sounds like it will also give you maybe a rehearsal a little bit for some of for the fall.
Okay. Well, we've been doing online learning pretty steadily throughout. We have a learning management system. We were very fortunate in that we had the technology to be able to hand out Chromebooks. Our high school students already had laptops that they were taking home with them. We had enough Chromebooks for students who did not have, middle school and elementary school students that did not have devices at home. We were able to hand out Chromebooks to them. And then we did have to purchase about 500 hotspots for students who didn't have internet access. So it was trial by fire doing all of that. So we have had some experience with that. We had a learning management system, so that really helped us with getting our students to, to be able to log in online and things like that. It was something our elementary students, because it was never meant for elementary, weren't familiar, but our middle and high school students had already used it, so they were familiar with it. It was helping parents get up and running with it. So we'll continue to use our learning management system as well, and as well as any training that we do with our teachers. That'll all be virtual this year, and we'll be using our learning management system to provide that.
Thanks, Diane. I think Derek has his hand up.
I think yeah.
Thanks, Ellie. Worcester, thanks for sharing. It's incredible what you guys are pulling off. Very excited to see what you're pulling together. We're at a little bit different end of the spectrum here. We did not have a learning management system in place in a lot of our schools. We did get devices out, which we're keeping the devices with our students this summer. Our elementary program that we're providing for elementary students actually is 100% in partnership with Caroline County Recreation and Parks for their summer programming. Sue has been a absolute wonderful partner. And her team has been for years, and I am blessed with the relationship that we do have with them, that we were able to work together to put a model in place that was going to be virtual. When the announcement came last week, I believe, that allowed for in-person, all of our plans had been built around a virtual model, including our funding sources associated with it that Sue could certainly explain, but a lot of our funding sources have been allocated on the new virtual model, which allowed us to have more time with kids, just in a different format. So we didn't have the flexibility to really switch and change on a pivot for them, but really exciting summer program we're looking at there. For our high school students, we will have credit recovery options available. It will be virtual as well. And we are working on developing our plan for some of our students to re-engage over the summer. Some of our students with IEPs, as well as some of our students are English language learners who are at the level 1 level on their English acquisition, to get them in to work with them on anything they may be behind on after the time off. We are continuing our reading and math interventions over the summer for all of our students as well, to assist with any learning loss that could be. And we're working on a summer Algebra 1 Academy for our students who were coming from the middle school to the high school, who had Algebra 1 in 8th grade, to make sure that they're getting the support that they need to transition into high school as well as they can. The transportation piece, we'll be looking to see how that goes for Worcester. Transportation is a tough one that we're working through, trying to figure out how we're going to make all that work in the fall. So again, looking to see how some others are making out, and hopefully will help educate all of us on the those outcomes and the feasibility. So it's kind of where we are right now.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And, you know, change is hard. I know more than once we've sat here and kind of pulled our hair out, and we're frightened enough that we realize, do we really know what we're doing? And yes and no. You do end up building things as you're flying them, and but you're also relying on an awful lot of experience and insight, just even when things were working well. So that's great. What about some of the rest of you in terms of your thinking about programming this summer? Are you in a holding pattern? Are you forging ahead? What are, you know, anyone else that wants to share on that level in terms of what they are doing? Let's see, Tom. Yeah. There we go.
Hi, this is Tom Hudson with University of Maryland Extension in Talbot County. 4-H has two different venues for reaching youth. Our club members, we're able to do some things with them and club leaders using Zoom or other platforms over the internet, hold leaders meetings or hold club meetings. The challenge for us is 4-H also has a mission of doing outreach education to youth and summer programs and after school programs, things like that. And so right now, that entire audience has been cut off from us. Some of the summer school or the child care centers have been closed. And now that they're opening up, even if we wait till August, the limit of 2 adults and 8 children for our 4-H programs looks as if it's going to interfere with that. So that's our challenge, is figuring out how to reach the underserved audiences. And I don't know if anybody has any brilliant ideas, but all of us in 4-H, we would take those ideas.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Any thoughts? Does anybody have any unique approaches they've been using to kind of connect with families and students that might have been disconnected? I know that's a big conversation. See, Caroline County is going to go
Right.
virtual till the 31st.
Yep.
And how are people feeling about their ability to meet the adaptations required to do the in-person work?
Yeah. Is that making sense to folks, or do you feel like you're surfing? There are times when we feel like we're surfing because it's dynamic, it is changing.
See more in the chat.
Yeah.
Thrilled to get an opportunity to get back in person, even with the limits, right?
Yeah.
I feel you that that is, and we have a hand up, it looks like. No, yes?
Oh, Navon? Yeah.
Hi guys, so this is Navano and I'm the 4-H educator in Caroline County, and I agree with what Jennifer said that, you know, even if we do have restrictions within the 4-H world, starting August 1, we have limited, you know, we're allowed to do some limited in-person programming limited numbers and there's a variety of sanctions and guidelines we have to follow, I still think it's better than nothing and it's a good start. And I know I personally am looking forward to it from the educator realm, but I also think a lot of our 4-H families and the clientele we work with are looking forward to it. If they're like me, they're zoomed out. You know, it's been very overwhelming as a non-techie person for me, having to turn and adapt all of our, you know, trainings and workshops and programming and meetings that we do to completely virtual. That's been really hard from my standpoint personally, just because I'm not a techie person, but also for a lot of our families, because many have reached out via phone or email and said, we just can't participate in anything because we don't have internet access out in the boonies of Ridgely or the boonies of whatever part they live in. And you know, that's been definitely a learning curve, and they've just felt very left out, which is hard for me because there's nothing I can do about that other than
Right.
providing everything I've provided via, you know, Zoom. I've been able to record it and send out the link to them, but their internet is so hit or miss, they don't even have a chance to watch it. So that's been really hard for me and a learning curve. So, you know, it's just, I personally am very happy for switch on August 1st for 4-H, you know, to go into the realm of starting to meet in person. And I believe our families are too. And I can tell you that they were very gung-ho in March and April to participate in the Zoom and the virtual opportunities that I was offering. But the last couple weeks, the attendance has been next to nothing. And to the point where I've had to switch to making everything pre-register. And if I don't have enough, I don't spend my Thursday or Friday night doing it, because it's become that bad. And I just think that everybody's a little zoomed out. It's the end of the school year and people just need a break mentally and physically. And I need a break mentally and physically. So I understand how they're feeling. But like I said, with what Jennifer said, that kind of made me feel the same way. And, you know, I think we're all kind of in the same boat, no matter what organization, school, or youth development agency we work with. You know, we're all kind of been forced to this virtual world that a lot of us aren't familiar with or comfortable with. And it's really put us out of our background and out of our own comfort zone. So.
Yeah.
Thank you for that. I think you shared the sentiment that a lot of people are feeling around the Zoom experience, and a couple of great suggestions in the chat box. Folks are talking about handing out packets or kits via the meal distribution sites, which I think is a really great way to connect resources to families. Seeing a lot, and we've heard a lot over the last few weeks of doing these conversations about technology access problems. So both the lack of devices and the lack of internet and the equity problems that creates. I will offer, we did hear a couple of creative solutions. They're not always easy to implement, but in addition to the Internet Essentials package that Comcast has been offering, T-Mobile has gotten into the mix, offering through hotspot devices. You buy the internet access for 6 months to a year, and then the device comes with it. I heard a partner in Washington County got those devices for all those kids. I don't know what grant money they used to pay for that, but then in Baltimore, we've been hearing about, Baltimore City, we've been hearing about mesh networks, people installing basically sort of like mini cell towers that build a broader access in communities. And I can share some of those, just links to things about that in the chat box.
Yeah, I think that would be helpful. That would be helpful. And you know, and I have to a shout out to Tom. He's right. A lot of youth development is an in-person, hands-on learning process, and the virtual element really takes that away. And that's a really good point. I know even in our own journey developing a virtual camp experience, we know that we have to look at ways to make that personal so that kids can see themselves and weigh in themselves on that experience and create that feedback. And we've not done that before. I mean, we do that all the time, face to face, giving kids that feedback. We haven't necessarily done it on a digital media platform. And yet still, we're still wrestling with the same digital desert type of a situation where the least, the last, and the lost that we really want to reach out and incorporate into our youth development and summer youth development programs aren't able to be there because the safety nets, the bus transportation, the in-present, that isn't necessarily available to us. So can we shift, Ellie, to the third question? How are you partnering with schools and school districts? How is that relationship going? Is it on pause, or have there been fruitful discussions, or what? What has been that experience? What was it before COVID? And maybe what is it now as you're walking through the summer programming? You know, what has been your feedback? Can folks raise their hand, or or certainly those of you that, like Diane, who is actually in the school system, how is the collaboration with outside organizations, or is that not an option? So, oh, and Diane, you shared Digital Wish as a grant organization that provides technology. Wow. That's fantastic. That's a great resource. So anybody weighing in regards to the conversations that they're having with schools and school districts?
And we'll be talking about this in the context of the fall as well.
Yes, absolutely. Okay. Okay. So, yeah, I guess we're a little radio silent as far as that. Oh, I see. Let's see. Gotcha. So some of you had some good relationships. They've always welcomed our 4-H extension programming. Yeah. Yeah. I appreciate that. Great. Yeah. Yeah. We've been fortunate in Caroline County just with the network of partners that we've had. So some folks are saying your contact has been minimal. Gotcha. Jeremiah, appreciate that quote. They were the worst of times. I gotcha. And that sounds like an incredible dynamic process. The robotics sounds pretty dynamic. Gotcha. All right. Well, should we, Ellie, shall we shift to, whoops. Let me see.
So these are the highlights. From do you want to go to the fall questions and then we'll come back to the report highlight? There we go.
Sure. So can anyone talk a little bit about what they're thinking about for the programs this fall? Let's see. I know for Carol, so we've got a couple of folks that have raised their hand.
Hello?
Yeah, go ahead, Jeremiah. Thanks.
I think, we looked at the documents that were sent. The one had 73 pages, so it's quite extent. But I think we kind of need to know, like before when we would do robotics, I don't know if that's not everybody, but, we would have them share kits, stuff like that. Like, we need to kind of know, are they allowed to share materials? Are they not allowed to share materials? Because that's a big consideration. I might have enough robotics kits to go into a classroom if everybody can share them, they can partner up. But if they're not allowed to do that, then I don't. So I know the schools are really scrambling. It said they had to have a plan for reopening by August the 14th. So they're busy right now figuring all this stuff out. But it'd be nice if as soon as they get that straight, they could tell us, okay, this is the protocol for doing this. This is the protocol for doing this. That way we kind of know what we can and can't do. You know, because right now we're just kind of, like you said, we're building the plane as we're flying it. And, you know, I'd hate to make a commitment and say, okay, yeah, we could go back into schools in October or whatever. And then all of a sudden be told, well, you know, this is the way things are. You can't have kids working in a group. You can't do this. You can't do that. You can't do this. And then you kind of say, well, then I really can't do what I wanted to do, you know, or I'm going to have to modify it to such an extent that it's not really going to work. And so not to be negative. I mean, I want to be positive, but at the same time, you don't want to make promises that you can't honor. So
True.
the schools,
True.
as soon as the schools figure out what they're doing, that can help us figure out what we're doing, if that makes
Right.
sense.
Right. Yeah. Schools as community, you know, I mean, they're the great gathering point for young people and the youth that we want to contribute to in terms of their development. And yet they've got whole systems there. What, like they say, the bigger you are, the harder you fall. And I think that's really true. But the other thing is practically extruding our program planning and operations through a public health and safety lens in a pandemic is sterile, structured, absolutely qualities that are the antithesis of what engage and involve and excite kids. And frankly, those of us adults that like to work with them. So that is definitely a real challenge. Navon had her hand up. So Navon, what are your thoughts? I don't know if yeah.
Okay. So I was just going to say that for me personally and for some of the programmings I work on, the fall, you know, it's very uncertain, like Jennifer just mentioned in the chat box, because, you know, there could potentially be a second wave of the virus hit. We just don't know. And I think the uncertainty is a big part of it. And so for things that I work on, and I, you know, lead a few committees that are planning some big events in the fall, and we're actually planning double. So we're planning to have these things in person, but we're also planning a virtual option as a backup. So that way we can still have our event and it can still happen. Just we're hoping for the best, but planning for the worst. And, you know, that's where we are. Things like our Midshore STEM Festival, which, you know, attracts like 350 people. Well, you know, we've had to move it out of Chesapeake College because, you know, they're not hosting in-person events at their facility. So we're trying to, you know, plan it virtually, but also have a backup space to also have it in person. So, I mean, it's kind of doubled the planning, all the uncertainty, because we just don't know. We want to continue with the event and still have it. And we think that offering something, you know, like a STEM festival can be done virtually, but it just adds for more, you know, it adds for double the planning, double the work, essentially. You know, I can tell you that within Maryland 4-H, like things like our state public speaking contests are usually held in April. We've pushed that to October. Now it looks like that's going to be completely virtually as well. So, I mean, there's so many things that, you know, we're just kind of in a holding pattern. We're just kind of waiting to see what happens with the schools as far as what we can do outreach wise. You know, I have a big grant here in Caroline County to work with Caroline County, the after school program through Recreation and Parks, but it's a mentoring and a tech wizard club, and we can't do anything until the schools get back in, but that's also a grant. So then a lot of that, you know, plays into it. And it's just so much uncertainty that it just really affects how we're planning. And it just, for us, I say it's double planning because we're doubling up on how we're planning. And I know Tom is part of the STEM Festival Planning Committee, and he can attest to this as well, that, you know, we're planning to have it in person, but we're also at the same time planning how can we take everything in person and make it virtual. And so we have two separate plans in place. And, you know, it's unfortunate, but fortunate in a way. So it definitely, the uncertainty of it is what's really making our the holding pattern in a way, but also things just being in limbo and just, not being,
Yeah.
that is so hard.
I feel you. Navon, I think too, if we had a nickel for time someone said to us, especially as a public recreation, oh, well, you canceled this event, you canceled that. What are you doing with your time? You know, and they have no idea the mental bandwidth of the cognitive uncertainty. And right, you've got plan A, plan B, plan C, and D, and that rolling in your head at the same time. I think it is true. Some of the blogs and website that we have seen, we cannot take self-care and for granted in this kind of an environment of uncertainty. And yet, boy, given the work that we do as far as youth development, what a challenge that is, because we have some of those skill sets, and a lot of what we were doing was helping develop those skill sets for our kids. That's painful. That is a painful loss for us all to endure.
I want to highlight something Derek put in the chat box, which is that each school system, and it's a bullet on this slide as well, has to create a stakeholder a group, a recovery plan stakeholder group with diverse stakeholders. And so for those of you who are feeling maybe a little more disconnected from your schools and your school districts, it might be good to either try to get on the group, as Sue is here in Caroline County, or find out who is on the group so that you can be communicating some of these questions like, will I need to have a robotics kit for every student, or will they be able to share them? I think even having your questions put forward help people think through all the contingencies in the plan. And I think exactly what you were just saying about double planning. I think as partners, we need to have, this is what our plan would be if we are allowed in your building. Here's what our plan will be if we are not allowed in your building. And here are the ways that we may still be able to partner and continue our relationship with you and your students, even if that physical connection can't happen. Because one of the things I've been saying that I think is really important is that continuity of relationship between the partners, the school, and the families and the students.
Yeah, definitely. Definitely.
And we hope that we're getting some, that you have some ideas too about those adaptations.
True. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I would say that from the stakeholders, finding out about that and seeing if you can't weigh in, or at least monitoring that on if they're posting things on the website. I think sometimes what it certainly does is humanize the process, because it's as much as we are multitasking and navigating that uncertainty, the school system is also a collection of human beings that is doing the same thing. And although it may still be frustrating, there is certainly an awareness of, getting involved in the stakeholder or monitoring that activity and being involved gives you an opportunity to walk a mile in their shoes as well. And so that can be helpful, at least, as I said, in humanizing it. So are there some other questions, Ellie, that we want to address as far as this fall and beyond, in terms of, are there other ways that folks are engaging students and families, and how can we include their voices in planning? Has there been any thoughts in regards to that, as you were, in some ways, the summer, we're kind of navigating the numbness of we're not able to reach out and engage and be a part of these students and these families' lives the way we used to. And that's taken some time. But as we look forward to the fall, I mean, one of the questions that you have on your prompt sheet is, how can we engage students and families? How do we engage their voices in planning? Don't know if there are some resources that any of you have leveraged, whether that's just calling people up on the phone or whether that is, have you navigated or worked around or through the digital divide, or those folks that are connected digitally? Have there been some resources that have been particularly helpful? Anybody have any thoughts in regards to that?
Yeah, what have you been hearing from parents if you've been
Yeah.
connecting with them? Are they afraid to send students to programs? Are they dying for places to send their students to programs? Maybe a little bit of both.
Yeah. Tara Horsey from the library here said both. Yes. And Tara, that's probably Tara speaking directly from experience as a mother of 2 sons. So I am sure. Yeah. Yeah, I think one of my staff said today that if we were opening up our community center for programming, I bet we could charge a significant registration fee, and there are parents that would write the check in a heartbeat, and that's not typical in Caroline County. So, yeah, that is true. That's interesting. Gotcha.
So there's I think as the numbers get better in Maryland, not all the way around the country, but our numbers have continued to improve. There is going to be more demand. And I think it's a question about whether we're going to be able to meet the demand, frankly, that is going to come later, maybe later in the summer. And certainly, eventually, as people go back to work and school starts in the fall, all the the logistics of life don't change for parents. I'm really interested in hearing if partners on the line have thought about, or if the school districts on the line have thought about partnering with outside organizations, if there are adaptations to the fall schedule, like A/B days or week on, week off. What are the thoughts about what kids do on those times, or places when they're not in school but maybe can't be left at home either? Oops, no, jumping ahead.
Yeah. Is that, yeah, so, I'm sorry, was somebody else going to talk? Sorry about that.
Love to hear thoughts about those partnering on the alternative schedules.
Yeah. Okay. So Derek's response, that's a great question, which means that may end up getting added to the list. Derek, is that right?
Well, can you guys hear me, Sue?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And just to think about, in Caroline County, we have not set on which model or models we'll be following in the fall, as most school systems are not quite there yet. We're wrestling with it all. But it's one of those that if we are at a health crisis per se, probably not the best word to use, but if we're at that point where we're considering where we cannot have students in school all day long, that's a really great question of what other option can we think of, because Caroline being where we're at, we know there's not enough childcare providers, whether centers or home-based providers, to meet that need for our families if we're going with, say, an every other day model. where 50% of our kids were not in school. So, I mean, Ellie, your question's a wonderful question to see what other options there could be out there to help support our families, support our kids, and support the school all at the same time. It's just a great question to ask for how to work through that, because odds are if we're at that point of saying only 50% of the kids can come in for health reasons, what other parameters may be on our communities at the same time that they're working through as well.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
One of the discussions that came up in some of the other conversations was the use of alternative spaces. Being able to connect with church facilities, with halls, with places where they're maybe aren't normally doing youth programming, but could be alternative spaces. If a partner could run programs in that space, if they're not a space-based program themselves, or their space is too limited size-wise to accommodate, enough students to make the difference. So those came up in earlier conversations.
Yeah, and I think then as a program manager, the devil is in the details, because you've got health and safety considerations, that is a tremendous lift, not impossible, but a tremendous lift. And if 50% of, when you start doing the math, even our after school programs, at least in Caroline County, didn't always meet all of the needs of all of the kids, so there are still going to be, just as Diane had said, we are really concerned about families not, having to work and that sort of a thing, and kids being home alone, literally the old latchkey problem that, defined youth development movement 25 years ago will definitely be a part of the challenge. You're right.
And Jeremiah brings up the cost of this. That I saw a diagram recently. I will actually drop it into the Google Drive. That was a cost estimate from the American Association of Superintendents about what it will cost schools to address COVID-19 concerns by category. So things like transportation, things like PPE, things like alternate schedules, and it was their costs are astronomical, and so adjusting your after-school model could be very expensive. So one of the things, when we get into our policy discussion is, what do we need to ask for in order to be successful in building some of these partnerships? And Stacey raised the issue of transportation.
Yeah, and for rural communities, how tremendous that is. Nicole also had her hand up. Nicole, can you weigh in?
Yeah, I just wanted to comment that, because I felt bad not being able to respond to any of your questions, but we have, I'm with University of Maryland Extension. I work with 4-H and FNET programs. So we have quote unquote restrictions on how we can deliver our outreach. So they're binding us on our future programming as for the summer, at least until August 1st. And I'll be honest with you, as far as my program planning, I'm kind of taking it month by month, just because I'm trying to do that outreach, especially with FNIP, which is Expanded Food and Nutrition Education Program. So I go I'm on the Lower Shore, into the Tri-County areas and do nutrition education in school and after school programs. But with after schools running up until maybe 2 days ago, some of these schools didn't know what kind of programming they were having. So I had all these lessons planned, but not how the implementation was going to happen, because we have restriction as University of Maryland employees. The schools have their own limitations. Working in Worcester and Wycomico and Somerset counties, we have very spotty internet in some places. So that's a challenge. So it's just it's just kind of muddling through and see how we can best reach the youth one step. I'm taking it like every 1 week at a time, a month at a time, because things are just changing so quickly. So I just kind of felt bad that I had some radio silence on my end, but just
Yeah.
back up what Yvonne and Beth and my other 4-H teams were saying. You know, it's just a little crazy trying to figure out how we're going to do all these amazing things that we've always done.
Right. Right. Very true. Very true. Yeah.
I want to put our school system friends on the spot for a second to ask a couple of questions. One is, what do you need from partners right now in the place that you're in? Like, do you want to hear from them about what they could be offering? Do you want to know what they're offering this summer so you can share that with your families? What do you need from partners right now? And then this is not a gotcha moment, because we won't hold your feet to the fire on this, but what do you think the likelihood, what's your betting odds that the likelihood is that you'll be able to have outside partners in your building next year? Or in your buildings, I should say, because thoughts. I know I saw Wacomico, I think maybe Worcester. I promise we won't hold you to it.
Anybody willing to take a gamble at that? Derek, he's formulating his thinking.
That's what happens when you say yes to Sue Simmons, right?
Yeah. Sorry, buddy.
No problem. After a full day of conversations around high school athletics too.
Oh boy.
So the first question, what do we need from partners?
Yeah.
First and foremost, and again, for those who aren't aware of the partnerships that Caroline County Public Schools has with Recreation and Parks and the other partners, 4-H and those associated through our after-school programs and summer programs, we really are blessed with it having a strong relationship over the years that we've worked hard to maintain and build. First and foremost is patience with partners and with ourselves at the school system level, because as folks have said, so much of this is changing rapidly. And to demystify the process, typically we find out that things are changing when the governor shows up on TV. That's how we became aware of a lot of the closures, and that's not a frustration point. That's just a reality point. And I get why communication channels are so tight. Totally get it. I'm sure there's very good reasons for it. But we have had to take a system that's typically not flexible, nor shall I say patient, in the educational system, and we've had to learn how to become flexible and patient with that information, and we've not been very good at that historically. And just respectfully would ask the same from our partners as we're trying to figure this out, because it is changing decades of practices in the way that we deliver and work with kids. From our partners as well. From Ellie, your question earlier, it really still has my head just spinning in a good way. I'll say from me personally, I've been looking at how do I help provide solutions to the challenges associated if we have a model where kids aren't in school every day. And there's the problem with my thinking that I'm trying to find the solutions. It's just a really good question with me to have me go to the partners to say, how can we do this together? As opposed to the school system having to figure out all the answers. So building that partnership with those creative solutions would be awesome to build out. As far as folks coming in the building in the fall, I'd love to say yes. I'd love to say the trajectory continues as it is. And I think if it continues to go as optimistic as everybody sounds right now, with things opening back up, and if all that stays going in the right direction, I'd say it's possible. But I'm sure there will be caveats that our health department will help us process through in terms of screening and protocols. But school systems are hubs. We don't do our job well if we don't do it with partners and with our community. So I'm optimistic that we'll find ways to build that out with partners, and we absolutely have to.
Thank you so much for that. Was a very honest and open answer, and I think a valuable impression from those of you who are trying to work with your school districts. I wanted to share this document, and I will drop this document in the Google Drive if it isn't already there. But this is just an example of how important it is to coordinate between schools and after-school programs. Because one of the things that will logistically might need to happen is that kids that would move from school to after school should actually stay together during the school day in order to keep less risk of cross-infection. My colleague in Connecticut developed this design. It's just one point of coordination to share, to say why it's so critical we have these conversations. Oops, I did not mean to do that. I'm so technology. I'm so fancy. Anyway, I just wanted to share that. Other thoughts about this fall? And do we have some chats and
I have to say a shout out to Diane. That's really Diane Stoltz in Worcester County. Well said. We need the help of all partners to work on these issues as they arise. You know, how can we put, can we put our heads together to solve them? I think is really, I think on the Eastern Shore, Stacy has heard me say this, we may not have much, but we do have each other. And I think that sometimes and I was telling Ellie this, because I'm going to run into somebody in the Food Lion or wherever else, there's a level of intimacy that exists on the shore that may not be something that our brothers and sisters have an opportunity to navigate in larger systems where people are separated by lots of organizational layers and that kind of a thing. Public schools are large ships, and in order for them to pivot, it does take some time. And I also appreciate Derek's perspective that being flexible and is hard for large organizations wherever they are. So I think that, that is, if there are any other insights that some folks that are here from Kent County or Queen Anne's County, if there's any insights that you have had in putting your head together with your respective boards of education and public school systems and those resources, that you've got some insights on that, please share. Or if you need some help on that, I'll get Derek to give you a call and find out who he knows in that system. Derek. So, but.
The one other thing we hope to learn from these conversations and is what else do you need to know? I know that we've talked about all the uncertainty. I think the materials question that Jeremiah brought up, that is going to be a new one to this conversation that hasn't been brought up before. So some of the things that have been brought up in earlier ones is can we as partners have access to students basically if we're not in the building in terms of communicating with them? Can we as partners with school issued technology, will the policies around school issued technology exclude partner activities from what students can do and use their devices for? Or could it, I guess the better way to frame it is, could it include partners in those things? And so, I'm just curious as to, in addition to things like shared materials or technology agreements, if there are other things that have been coming up for you as you are like doing your A/B scenario planning, what you might be asking that you're not sure about. Looking. So hard to look at the chat box and the participants at the same time and try to figure out if somebody has a hand up or if somebody's chatted.
Yeah.
Need a easier view in these Zoom. I'm going to redesign Zoom for. So Derek said it could be a challenge if students have iPads and there are specific apps. It is a specific tech answer, but could avoid an issue. Yeah, so aligning apps, I think, actually is these are all very practical matters, but if a partner can align what they're doing with what the school system's doing, I know, for instance, a lot of school systems shut down Zoom, and we're only using Google Classroom, Google Meet type products because of security concerns with Zoom, the Zoom bombing. I don't know if anybody experienced a Zoom bomb this summer. Diane says, we can have outside agencies use our learning management system to have meetings and share information. It allows us to monitor and provide a layer of student data and privacy. So that's great. That is a great answer and a great model to share with maybe other districts that haven't thought about allowing that use.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Extension in Cecil County is probably the model for integrated 4-H, UME, and school system partnerships. They are integrated with training and implementation of programming in multiple grade levels. That's another thing that has come up as scenarios, is that there could still be opportunities for partners to even be embedded in the school day work so something else to think about in terms of your scenario planning. We definitely have heard that as well. In one call, the UME partner in, I think it was either Allegheny or Washington County, was really helping their science teacher adapt some of their curriculum virtually, and helped run units with the students this spring. I mean, so.
Yeah.
So to see all these great ideas of ways that we can do new and different collaboration. Poor Derek, you're really getting nudged today.
Oh.
Junior Achievement has done that for many years in Wacomico County. Yeah, so there's a lot of ways we can continue these partnerships, and so more integration. It doesn't just have to be our typical you get after school, we get in school model. Maybe we need to blow it up a little bit, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Are there any other questions that are up on the display that those of you that are, in looking at that you want to pick apart or you want us to wrestle with this in terms of inequities of access, or how we might best partner with each other moving forward? Any of those questions that we want to address, or that you want to address, moving this forward?
Also, if there are any resources you want to share that you have found particularly helpful, even in this time, we've heard in these calls about all sorts of things that creative things people have used. I want to share one resource with you, and I'll do it in the chat box. Actually, it's two. We have actually, I have three, but I'm not going to put them all in the chat box. We've been working with the National Statewide After School Network to develop 150 free age-leveled activities that can be done either virtually or in person. And it's at a website, summeractivityguide.org, and I'm putting that in there. They're being released in batches throughout the summer, so not all 150 are up. And lagging about a week behind each batch is a Spanish version of the activities as well. All free, downloadable. I think I've been reviewing the older age group activities, and I've been excited by them. I've gotten great feedback from people who have been using them or downloading them. So I hope folks will do that. There's also a new app out. It's called Mizzen by Mott. I'm gonna have to look up the link for that. That has, again, a whole bunch of other curriculum stuff on it. So it's got like National Geographic and Jazz at Lincoln Center and all sorts of stuff that you can have right on your app. You can do with students. Some can be done virtually. So I will put that in the guide. And then we have been doing some online PD with an organization called CipherWorks. And they have 2 free courses. One is just on COVID-19 in general, and one is actually on reopening. And those courses will be linked on the resource page that we have all the materials from this conversation on. And so I just got the links for the reopening training today. And again, you do not need to subscribe to our PD platform in order to take these 2 free courses. But we will make them available to everybody. So just wanted to share those things.
That's great, Ellie. So these are professional development classes for reopening after-school programs or youth development programs particularly?
Yeah, I mean, they're really designed for school-age childcare, but I think the lessons would be for any youth serving program.
Got it. Got it. Excellent. All right. Well, where do we go from here?
Sounds good. Let's go to that next slide. Oh, there we go. So our last part of this conversation is just what should we do next, right? What are because of what we've heard today from each other about the interest in really supporting partnerships and in collaborating, in learning from each other. We want to know, and then seeing the concerns raised about what are the resources we're going to need to achieve some of these things. I can tell you a little bit about what's come out of the earlier conversations, and would love to have your involvement in that. And then we'd love to hear what you think locally as well. So right now we are crafting a value statement about the role of youth development out of school time as a partner in this, which will also include some very specific recommendations like including us in the recovery planning process in terms of thinking about partners as an alternative in the AB schedule, thinking about ways partners can maybe creatively contribute even during the school day. Those kinds of recommendations will be in this document. We plan to share that document at the state level to our governor, to the MSDE, to legislators, also to MABE and PZAM, which are the State Board of Education Association and the Superintendents Association. And so I think that will give us that statewide level, but we also know that action happens on a local level, and it might need to be customized, and we'll have some kind of sign-on process to this as well. But I'd love to hear your thoughts about more things. And I don't know, you all may know Tammy Shea, and she's in Queen Anne's County. She texted me, she's on the phone. She texted me that she said that Queen Anne's County and 21st Century is working very closely with the district there. And that she had an idea that it's the time to reach out to our communities for volunteers for help, especially technology. And maybe most can help build a statewide volunteer list to ask as a help desk. So I'll have to figure out what I do with that. I think there is a way that we can be a clearinghouse for sure for some resources, and love to hear your guys' thoughts about what action steps. Even if you don't have an action step for us collectively, maybe you have an action step for yourself from our conversation. And one of the reasons I think it's important for us to think about this is there are resources, and they may not be enough to stem all the gaps that are going to be created, but coming from the federal government, the governor has discretion on some of those resources. And then most of the money is going from the state to local decision makers, so to the LEAs. So if there are resource questions, those are things that we should be also raising. This is always the hard part, the action item.
Yeah.
Does anyone have an action item that they're going to take away for themselves from this conversation?
I think for myself, it is going to be definitely making sure that the recovery plan and the opportunity to be involved in that I'm spreading I'm spreading some of the conclusions and the ideas and that type of a thing that are formulating in that to not just my colleagues here at Recreation and Parks, but to some of our partners, to make sure that our 4-H partners are aware of, that thinking and what some of those possibilities are, and making sure that even the relationships and rapport that we've established with our local health officer to get through some of the nitty-gritty detail, that we're making sure that they have access to some of that thinking and those judgments as well. The worst thing that happens is that I send them an email that they already got that news and it's duplicated. So that's one step for sure for me. Don't know if anybody else has some steps they want to share.
We have some steps in the chat box. One person's going to look up the links we've dropped in the chat box and follow up on those. And Thomas is going to plan to contact the child care centers housed in the county public schools to discuss options for the late summer or fall. Jeremiah says, finding out what the county superintendents want, need, or able to do would be helpful. So I think, as Derek has stated, it's patience is required, but this may actually be the moment now that schools have ended for the year or are ending briefly, to prepare to really reach out now and get connected to those recovery groups in particular? And Derek says yes.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
Any other thoughts about, you know, asks for most as a network, a statewide network, things that that would be helpful to you as far as resources? Hopefully this case statement and the sort of those specific recommendations that we're trying to get to in terms of, you know, all of those things that we've talked about so far: align technology, access, communication, engagement and planning, being part of the solution for different scenarios. Those will all go into that document. Materials now. Thank you, Jeremiah.
Yeah. I would also say for those of us that are navigating that virtual program platform, that if there are some things that, if there are some best management practices that we are finding work, and some things that don't work, that would be wonderful to share. I know we're figuring it out as we do it as well. And so if there are some insights that any of you are gathering in that process, and likewise, we'll be happy to share some of the insights that we're coming up with in Caroline County as well. I have a feeling that this is an aspect of our program and our service delivery that isn't going to go away. So we're gonna definitely, if we think we're done with that, we're going back just to face-to-face, I think I don't know if that is really what the future holds for us. Face-to-face is critically important, and I don't think that we'll lose that. But and I think because the school system, at least in Caroline County, is one of the major employers in Caroline County, and for us, they are an important community center. I think one of the things that we also really have to look at, and something that I'm concerned about, and I wouldn't necessarily, I can't put words in Derek's mouth, but I would expect that as a school system, they would also be, what is that balance? It would be very easy for school systems to become increasingly isolated, in that because of the health and safety precautions, all of a sudden it's going to be difficult to accommodate parents, in the schools, or community programming in the schools, and those are really the how do we preserve the community center nature of our local schools, particularly in a rural environment where we have limited alternative spaces. How do we preserve that? Because we could lose it. And I don't necessarily blame systems for, oh my gosh, the burden of the educating in this environment is difficult enough. We've got to keep that door open. We've got to wedge that door open, and because I think schools realize they can't do it alone, that partnership is invaluable, and might make it a little clunky at times, but a necessary element of this dynamic. And
I'm going to go back and take that section of that video that you just wrote and transcribe it. Because I think it is the critical part of our value statement message, is that of what you just said, is that the sense of our schools as community centers and that role that they play, and the role that the synergy between schools and partners and students and families happen in that space is so important. And like I said, I'm gonna dial that through, write that down. You're gonna get a little quote in a box.
That's fine. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And on that note, I think, I just think we'll go through next steps.
Yeah.
So we are going to have, I have so many boxes, I can't even look at my own slides. So there will be a local summary developed pretty much in the next 24 hours or so. The recording to this, the Chatbox text, the PowerPoint will be on the landing page that we have for all of these events, which I'll show the website in a minute. We're doing 11 events. We have 2 more this week, 2 next week, and then 1 to be scheduled, which is a statewide event, which I would invite you all to attend, and information will be coming out shortly. And then we want to continue to get your feedback and any resources you want to share. We will definitely be trying to get feedback on the larger document that we're creating. And if you would like to volunteer to be in my little subgroup of folks writing the document, I would love that. You know, I just want you to know that we really appreciate you giving us your time today. I know it's a lot, and we do a lot of Zooms, and it's hard to have all these conversations. But you know, everything you've said has been super valuable to the larger, to the full picture of this. So, and I've been so glad to really do these regionally and reconnect in places that we haven't been as frequently. And you know, I want to build on that, and it's very exciting. And so the website to find all those resources is right there. It's mostnetwork.org. Resources, recovery, that's where all the recordings and stuff will go. Plus the courses, the COVID courses I mentioned will be up there. And that's it. If you have more, if you want to reach out to us, we would love to hear from you. And if you are, if you want to join in that little subgroup on the writing of the document, just send me an email, which is on the slide and also now in the chat box. And I think we'll hang out for a second to see everybody's closing remarks. And
Yeah, thank you all very much for your insight and your work and your patience. Be patient with yourselves, for sure. It's been a challenge for me. And all right.
and thank you to Sue for being such an awesome moderator today.
No, my
Bringing that-
pleasure. Yeah, my pleasure. All right.
That's right. Even though it is a strange situation, we're all solving these problems. You know, it's interesting to hear the differences between regions for sure. But it's also, you know, we are hearing a lot of the same too.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay.
All right. So we're going to end today. You get a few minutes back. We always, reclaiming time is always a great thing.
Yeah.
And I, again, just thank you all, and you'll hear more from us shortly.
All right.
Goodbye.
Well, folks, yes, stay well. Thanks again. Right. Okay.
Just us.
All right.
Thank you so much, Sue.
Yeah. Now, I did send a quick chat. If you need some assistance with the document draft, or if you need an editor or that kind of a thing, I'm happy to weigh in on that. Not a
That would
problem.
be great. Yeah, Tammy also volunteered by text, so.
Very good.
Yeah.
Great. Great. Okay. Well, thanks. I hope it at least met some expectations. I hope we're getting some information in regards to that.
We absolutely are. I mean,
Good.
each conversation, it gets richer, gets more nuanced.
Good.
It's really great to have folks like Derek on to provide that perspective. It just really, I think, helps round it out.
Right.
And-
Because then you can't just that damn public school system kind of a deal. I mean, there really are humans that are involved in that. And he is, I did email him last night and pushed him a little bit. He said he had something else going on, but he did adjust his schedule to be a part of it, which I really appreciate. So, yeah. Yeah.
All right. Well, thanks
All right.
again, Sue. I'll be in touch.
Okay. Sounds good. Take care. Bye.